All right, there we go. We are recording. Sweet. All right, so this is What Not to Say. This is one of the breakout sessions for our 2020 GLOA training. This is going to cover a lot of things that Jeremy and I bounced a few ideas back and forth on stuff that we have said, stuff that we have heard, things that have gone around the referee sphere all over the country about stories gone wrong of referees stepping into things or putting foot firmly into mouth. So this is going to cover a lot of those things, and we're going to be pulling in some quotations from Verbal Judo, the gentle art of persuasion, which is a model for conversation that is typically marketed to police officers for ways to de-escalate tense situations without having to resort to forceful physical compliance, ways in which you can obtain compliance without having to use force. And since we only have in our way of that, we don't use force, we use flags and penalties. It's how can we obtain compliance without having to penalize? Not saying that we'll never penalize, but how can we avoid that problem and work the solution from a different perspective? So we're going to run through a couple of those. A good number of things about what not to say, and then we're going to wrap it up with some practical tips of what to do, because we don't want to say what we don't want to do. We're going to do a few things for how to set your line and stick with that, your threshold. We're going to look at a model of conversation that you guys can conceptually hold on to for ways in which you can approach any type of argument, conflict, whatever, verbally, that I've found very helpful for myself. And then we'll take questions, but we'll have opportunities. Again, type questions in the box if you want to put them there, or unmute yourself and send those that way. And I want to make sure, because I got to check. I got so many pop-ups. Admit all. There we go. Thank you, Ryan, for the heads up. I'm going to keep that on there, so that goes on that space. Jeremy, while I'm doing that, you want to say a little intro on your end, or get rolling?
I think we're good, Gordon. I'm Jeremy Redmond. You all know me. I'm glad to help. And hopefully Gordon and I can help keep you out of trouble and give you a few tips for, just keeping a game running.
Oop. Sorry.
Unmute. Okay, sorry. No, I'm good, Gordon. I'll follow your lead. Go ahead.
All right, man. All right. Cool. All right, so let's go in here. So, all right, one of the quotes: if your antagonist can upset you, he owns you at some level. This is deeply true, and I've been in this space. The minute that we yell at a coach, the minute we lose our temper, that coach owns us. I don't particularly think it's fair, but that is the reality, right? They're allowed to rant and scream. We are not. We have to maintain our level of calm. Jeremy, what does this really say to you?
Well, one of the things that this brings to mind is as soon as they raise their voice at us, is if we match it, we've lost. If you can keep your voice, the tone of your voice, the volume of your voice lower than the coach, the contrast is clear and everyone can see what's happening. So think about that when you're, interacting with coaches. The sideline, the fans, the players are all watching you. Keep the volume of your voice lower than the coaches.
We call that the Jedi mind trick, is what my buddy calls it. And he's like, this is not the call you were looking for. We have the power to stay calm, right? Yeah. So we'll dive into some ones that are kind of immediate landmines. I don't care. Now, this is generally said without thinking. I've been in this space as well, and it's one that when I'm putting on my stripes, this is a word, this is a phrase that I eliminate from my vocabulary. And typically this tends to happen in like a youth game scenario or a running clock scenario where a coach is like, come on, get the restart going. The clock is running. We want to get a possession. And you say, coach, I don't really care. Now, does it do anything? No, but you certainly haven't helped yourself with that, right? You haven't done anything except increase that level of antagonism toward you and your partner or partners. Jeremy, have you ever had this one here?
I've never said that, and I'm glad I've never said that.
Don't.
But I mean, you could imagine wanting to say that if you were in a game that you don't think is going particularly well, the skill level is not high, it's raining, you've got to work tomorrow. It might cross your mind, but hey, you're being paid to do this job, and you should do the best you can at it. And that type of language like that's not an indication that you're really taking it seriously, and it's going to lead to all sorts of trouble.
Agreed. This pisses people off to no end. So work to eliminate that, and also remember, it's. I find it helpful to in those games, like Jeremy said, when I'm struggling because I got a lot going on, or it's just a cruddy game on a cruddy day, right? You got to do a few things to keep yourself engaged in that. I remember one game where I was with one of our more experienced officials, John Oshner. He has now moved up to Virginia, where it was I won't mention the teams, but it was a horrible day on a horrible field, and they were horrible teams. We had 11 players on one side and 12 on the other total. And every time he tossed me the ball, this was a collegiate game, he would say 175, which was our game fee for the day, which was just the check to say, hey, come on, we're getting paid for this, so keep the professionalism up. Right. You never, or you always. I have been on the receiving end of this from coaches. Jeremy, how about you?
Yeah, probably. If so, I don't remember it, but tell me a little bit more of what you're hearing, Gordon.
Yeah, so this one here, and also especially if doing observations over the course of the season, and you get to know one team kind of well, and if they get kind of paired up with a crew over the time, you can get this thing of, you always screw us over, or you
Oh,
never make that call, or you these are things where they're absolutes, they are extremes, they are not true, right? They're said in angry fashion, and they are meant to express that anger. If we in the other side turn that around and be like, you know, coach, you are never nice. You never have a good way of saying it. You are always pissed off every time I show up to a game. These are things that stick with that individual. These are things that they're going to associate with you now forever, and that's a tough thing to be able to overcome
yeah.
uh, in the future.
They're allowed to comment on our performance. We're really not allowed to comment on the coach's performance. And never and always are absolutes. And the older we get, Gordon, we know that there's a lot of gray in this world.
There is, and I love that bit of saying, we don't get to comment on how they or the teams are doing. I mean, that's one of those where, yeah, it's one of the quirks of being an official. We are in the game, but we are not a part of the game in a sense. One official put it that we're like a water filter. Our job is to take the dirty water, and by just staying in the middle of all that, make it clean and potable, right?
Right.
So it's not really, we're not trying to do any more than that. And anything that we do to take away from that process defeats that process as well.
Right. It's like the coach, telling us that we missed a slash. And if we were to come back and say, well, coach, how is it that you couldn't score on 2 men up? We can't do that type of criticism. We have to take it. It doesn't go the other way. It just goes one way.
And I think I saw Joyce's name on here. I'm sure he has fielded calls as his members of the board for an official who has said something at the tail end of a game, blowout, rivalry, tight, whatever, and that gets sent up the chain.
Yeah.
And you'd be surprised if you ever get another game, at least for the remainder of that year, at that space, because that coach never wants to see you again.
Yeah.
And these are these things that these are, again, potential landmines that you don't need to, you don't, they add aggravation to your day and to your refereeing experience that are entirely within your control.
Well, think about it. Just in everyday life, it's easy to say shitty things like this, right? It's much more difficult to be gentle and kind. So it's just a harder job.
Mm-hmm. Okay. If you want that call, pay for 3. I heard this while I was observing over the summer, and the coach, because I was in the box area, just looked at me, and I just opened my hands on him. I can't. I got nothing for you. I can't defend that statement. We say it all the time in referee training, and maybe that's part of the problem. But this is a referee inside joke. It's for us. It's not for coaches.
Right.
It's not for parents when they're saying, "Why did you miss that call?" As you're walking down the thing, it's just like, "Because I don't have a third official, ma'am." No, it's flipping.
This is a no-no. We got to do the game that we've been assigned. Period.
Hey, Gordon, I have a question for you, sir.
Shoot.
So, what happens if you have a coach for no reason of your own volition that just doesn't like you? Okay.
Okay.
Doesn't. So, how is the best way to, you think, handle that situation? Even though you've done nothing to them, they just have a personality conflict with you.
Okay. I think that's a good bit. I will. I'll give a short story on this one. I think we'll illuminate kind of what I ran into. So years and years ago, there was an assistant coach at Lassiter who was a problem for me. A problem. I don't know why, but every single game he's on my tail, absent the rest of the crew, just on my tail the whole time. And it's like I'm running just as hard as I do in any other game and trying to work with him. And maybe I had said something or done something early on. He's just like, that guy's a terrible official. I'm going to give him grief every time. Okay. 1 year rolls around. I've got this team 4 times over the course of the year. And every time I start my pregame with, this coach is going to be a problem for me, probably the rest of the crew, and is probably going to earn at least a conduct foul, just as part of my pregame. First game, silent. I was weirded out. Second game, same conversation with my crew. Not a problem. Lovely guy on the sideline. Third and fourth game, identical. I was confused, but I'm like, all right, hey, maybe he finally likes me or mellowed out somehow. I'm like, this is great. I see him over the summer, and we're chatting after a summer ball game. I'm like, hey, coach, not for nothing, but I just really say I really appreciated how you conducted yourself on the sideline this past season. It made the game flow a lot better, and it was a lot more pleasant for me. I really appreciated your demeanor. And he said, Gordon, I got my hip replaced in January. I was on Vicodin the entire spring. I was so calm and drugged out. Don't worry, I'm gonna be back to my usual self next year. And I'm like, great, okay. So it's kind of a fun story in that bit, but that did kind of show, number one, I don't know what's going on in that coach's life that makes one thing what or whatever, and whether they're nice to me or not, I can't control any of their behaviors. So that's one mentality to maintain. And then the other thing is if a coach doesn't like you, block the team. If it's that much of a problem that you're concerned about, I've got one program in mind that will remain nameless that I just do not want to officiate. And there's plenty of other games around. And I'd rather not have that aggravation. Jeremy, thoughts?
Yeah.
Can I jump in?
Go ahead, Patrick.
So if that happens, let me know.
Yeah.
So that way I can address it accordingly. Because what people don't see is besides these signs, we can go back door. I can have conversations with people, and I can figure out what's going on. And again, there's 125 teams, and I will tell you that there are certain programs that I don't even go visit because the fact is it's just not going to be good. I have 125 teams. There are going to be personalities that don't mesh.
Yeah, and if you block, I think there's a minimum or a max you can block. If you're having to hit the maximum block number of teams, you might want to start looking at, am I the problem? Just FYI there.
Chris,
yeah, but I just encourage you to contact the assigners. Let us figure out what's going on, because there are conversations where I have after the fact, and it's just like they just say they don't like the person. And again, I know who Gordon was talking about, who's on Vicodin, and that guy yelled at me all the time too. So it's nothing against you, Gordon.
Let's face it, there are jerks out there, Chris. But I've got to the point now. Early when I was officiating, I try to avoid them and avoid confrontations. But in a way, I don't look for trouble, but I kind of look at it as a challenge when I have coaches like that, though, and it helps me raise my game. It makes me try to excel to the best point I can be, and the best official I can be. So in a way, in some ways they make me better, just because I see it as a challenge. And then of course the dynamic changes if you're the referee versus, the field judge or the umpire. If you're the referee, the stakes are higher because you've got to communicate with that coach. But if you're the field judge or the umpire, you don't have as much interaction.
Yeah. Best thing about being the umpire or the field judge.
Yeah.
Coach, that's a great question.
Yeah.
I'm going to go run that by my referee. Give me a minute.
That's
Best thing about being the U and the FJ.
Right. And this is something you can do too, Chris. Like if, you've got a problem with a coach, or one of your crew members have a problem with a coach, is you have to be careful how you do this, but is to keep that partner who's having trouble with the coach on the far side. You don't want to cut his legs out from under him. But if it's helpful, you can rotate in such a way that that official is not interacting with that side of the bench.
Right. It was more for the point that there's probably more than just that happens more often than it probably we're all aware of. So that was just kind of a good conversation to have for everyone, just to consider what's going on.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Plus, everyone loves me, guys. Come on, I'm a nice guy.
There you go.
But the other thing Patrick can do, by the way, is if you have a problem with that coach, or if a particular, official A has a problem with that coach, is to put like a Peter Fleury on the crew.
Yeah.
That, and
Peter has a problem with everybody. Nobody likes him, so that evens it out.
Won't put up with that at all, and the coach may, get a different game. So that's another thing, is communicate with your assigner and have maybe a different mix of officials on the crew.
Love that. So this is one, this was early in my officiating career, Jeremy, where I was actually advised to ask the coach, what color is the rule book? And again, it goes back to that kind of like flippant, kind of sarcastic, arrogant way of talking. But here's the problem. Lately, the rule book hasn't really changed colors. That's one. Okay, so it's been blue for like the last 4 years.
Right.
But like it had changed like blue, green, yellow once at some point, and it's like, okay, great, but it's like, how many freaking rules are really changing every single year of impact to the game? This is just an insulting question. The coaches, we'd like for them to know the rules. Some of them really do, but you don't need to know all the rules of lacrosse to coach a lacrosse team. And this is one of those things of just being saying, just like, well, coach, this is basically like saying, like, why don't you go ahead and ref? In my mind.
Yeah, it's just really sarcastic and unnecessary. But what happens if the coach picks the right color and then cites rules to you chapter and verse? What are you going to do?
There you go. Now you've stepped into it. You have created a bigger problem, right? Where before, remember, this is the golden thing about this entire presentation. Silence can never be quoted, ever.
Right.
When in doubt, keep your mouth closed. This is why I chew gum, because I need something to do if I'm getting frustrated.
Yeah.
All right. Jeremy, you mind reading this for us?
Sure. So what separates professionalism from amateur behavior is giving our opponent no solid grounds to make a stand against us with our comments or actions.
So Mike was very adamant about, the professionalism of our association, the GLOA shield that we have, and the reputation that we have, not only in Georgia, but around the country. Our guys have traveled extensively. And the thing that is a brand of officiating that is very strong, and that's strong because of you all, because of us. And if we maintain a professional behavior from the moment our car touches the pavement of the school until the moment we leave, that is going to go well for us long term. And more importantly, also helps the newer officials coming into the association. So consider this of just like, you're always helping the next crew on the game. I don't know who they're going to play next, but if I can, through my actions, make their lives a little bit easier because I wasn't a pain for the coaches to have to deal with, those coaches probably go into that game with a better mindset towards the officiating crew. So you're kind of paying it forward in that respect. What do you think, Jeremy?
Yeah, the two things strike me about this, Gordon, is one is you're not just representing yourself on the field, you're representing an entire association of more than 100 people who everyone just like you cares about and has integrity and is serious about the work they do. So that glow a shield that you have, that emblem, we don't, want to muddy it by using sarcastic behavior, flippant type of comments. The other thing is that Gordon has said this before, is that, everything is on tape these days. So that really nasty thing you said could be picked up on microphone, and that coach who hates your guts now could put that out there on social media for everyone to see. And so that really, that, mistake you made can carry on for a long time. We're on stage. It's just the matter of fact, and the audience is watching, and you're being taped and filmed. So think about those things. Take it seriously, have the integrity, and when you think about those sarcastic, flippant comments, just swallow them. Put your whistle in your mouth, chew gum, something like that.
And as an aside to that, Jeremy mentioned this. This goes into the realm of the digital world as well. We have a social media policy. NCAA officials, NILO officials have a social media policy. That's pretty much across the board now in officiating, because that's part of the conversation. I just, as a matter of fact, unless I'm sharing something from the GLOA page, I make no mention about any games I'm refereeing or any interactions I want to. I don't care how funny or interesting it is. I will talk about it in the post game with my crew. I will talk about it in this type of setting because it's more professional. But when that stuff gets out there, that gets screen grabbed, and that's just another piece of ammunition that coach has against you in the future to cause a problem. All right, so this extends beyond just these interactions.
Hey, Gordon.
Go ahead.
So if you encounter one of your partners or field judge or rookie official acting in an unprofessional manner, what would be some recommendations or suggestions on how to be that mentor in saying, hey, you might not want to do this, or after the game, or is there something that we need to address with, say, the board or the signer?
Great question. And there's kind of, I think, really two paths depending on your level of comfort with that individual, and also your level of kind of stepping into that potential minefield of like, hey, this is this guy, how this guy refs his game, right? For me personally, that's one where after the game, when I do a post game, one of the questions I always ask is there anything in that game you want back? Is there a call? Is there an interaction? Is there a positioning thing? Just one thing you'd want back to do over again, what would it be? And that may naturally lead into whatever situation that you might have referenced there, some unprofessionalism that was witnessed. And if not, I could be like, okay, here's my thing. And especially if I'm the crew chief, I can be like, from my perspective, I saw this thing happen in the third quarter. What was going on over there with that coach? And ask it in that kind of broad fashion, and then allow that official to tell the story on their perspective from what happened. And then you can tell what it looked like from your side of things, since you're not the one in it, right? If that's something where you're comfortable on that end and you can start kind of molding that official's perspective as far as their actions weren't really ideal for what was going on, awesome. If you're not feeling that, call the helpline, right? Call the helpline. But more importantly, again, is get in touch with one of the assigners of something. I had to do that with one official in 15 years, and bad thing happened. And that's one where I'm like, I don't feel comfortable going up to this individual about this thing. I don't think he's going to respond well to me in any way, shape, or form. So I'm going to, again, as part of the crew, being like, I got to let my assigners know, because this could happen to another official in the future. And again, I'm trying to make that facilitate better experiences down the road. So just like, hey, and again, just like a post game or a game report, just tell the facts. This is what I saw. This is when it happened. This is what was going on. Do with it what you will, right? And although I don't really do it at all, you can also block some officials on Arbiter. And again, there's a max limit on that end. But you can go in there and you can block out an official, say, I just, even if just for a year, I don't really want to work with this guy for a little while. Okay, cool off. Jeremy?
Yeah, really good points, Gordon. I second what you had to say, but a few things, Ryan, I would note is that one thing you can do is serve as an example, right? Is have your best game as the referee, so that field judge and that umpire is observing the way it's done. So serve as an example. The second thing I would mention is the timing is important about when to bring this up. Obviously, it's really important not to discourage them and shake their confidence and take them out of the game by criticizing them in the middle of the game. So you have to be very careful about that. I like Gordon's idea of doing it at the end of the game, during the post game. And then something Gordon said is really important is if you can get them to the point where they recognize their own mistake, that's so much better than you pointing it out. So by asking leading questions, what did you think about that incident, that episode? If you had to do it all over again, what would you have done? That sort of thing. Bring somebody to make the realization on themselves and make the change themselves versus somebody they perceive criticizing them can really be good. But if it's serious enough, like Gordon said, we're all here for you on the helpline. We want to hear about any problems you're encountering because we want to correct them. We want it done right. So you can do that confidentially with any of us on the helpline, and certainly consult the assigners as well.
Yeah, and I'll make this real quick. Call me. Even if you're going to send an email, let me know. And the only other thing I would say, these guys have very good information here, is also trust your gut. It might be one of those things, too, where you absorb it, and then maybe a phone call the next day might work, too. So just, take it in and realize sometimes after a game, we're tired, especially if you've done two, or emotions are high, or something's wrong that day. So just also, I'd say trust your gut.
All right. We're going to call the game tight today, Coach. Or, Coach, we're going to call a pretty loose game. This is a trap. This is, and I've seen this. I haven't said this. This is one of those, I heard this. I'm on the crew. The crew chief said this to the coach. Said, we're going to call a really tight game today, Coach. That's what the tournament director wants for these two teams. So we're going to call it really tight. Okay, and says the exact same thing to the other coach. And I didn't really think anything of it until the first no call of the game, where there was probably a brush or some kind of bump, and it didn't rise to the level of even a technical foul. And one coach was screaming, "You said you were going to call the game tight. This is already a safety. This game's going to get out of control if you don't, do what you said you were going to do." Conversely, coach, we're going to call the game loose. The very first flag anybody throws, the entire crew is getting run over by the bus coming. This is one of those things where you set yourself up. I think, and this is also one, it can be a trap as well, because coaches will ask you, hey, Gordon, hey, Jeremy, how are you going to call the game today? That is a trap. Here's the best answer for that. Coach, we're going to call the game as we see it. We're going to call the game that develops. We're going to see what happens. That is, I go broad, and I don't want to put myself in a corner unnecessarily, right? I can be in my mind with my crew, hey, we're probably going to have to call this game really tight based on how these players have been historically. And then we play, and there's not a foul in the entire game. And you have to reassess and be like, oh, I guess all the rough players graduated or stopped playing. So you have to be able to adapt, but you can't set expectations that you can't reasonably maintain. Jeremy?
Yeah, it is a trap. I don't do that for those reasons. And in those pregame conversations where we're doing certification with the coaches, it's really, how are you? My name is Jeremy Redmond. My partners introduce themselves. We shake hands, though during the pandemic, we'll probably be avoiding that. Coach, you certify your players are properly equipped. Do you have any questions? Usually they don't. Can I get your captains? I'm going through this very briefly. I want to keep it polite, eye contact, shake hands, but I'm not getting into anything about how I'm calling the game, because you're painting yourself into a corner. Because as soon as you do something you said you're not going to do, then the coach is going to go after you. The other one that I don't like that I hear is, we're going to let them play until they show us they can't. What does that mean? That doesn't mean anything. And it's another trap too. But I like Gordon's response when they ask you to call, how you're going to call the game. It's how it develops. We're going to try to keep it. Our job is to keep it safe and fair. So yeah, avoid that one.
Good stuff, Jared. Okay, it's only youth ball. It's only JV ball. It's only whatever ball, right? There was years ago, an official had to get a serious talking to from many members of the board because he didn't understand what the problem was with this, and this got sent up the chain, so to speak, very rapidly and very angrily, because this was some coach yelling at him, and I think maybe the quote was something like, "Coach, relax, it's only youth ball." So what? They're still playing. They're still players. Coaches are still coaching. Just because nothing's really on the line, and we can have plenty of discussions about the philosophy of winning and losing and character development in kids and all that, that's not our role in that space. Our role is safety, fairness, the facilitation of the game. We'll talk more about that at the end. And these types of comments, this one especially, is one that is going to come back and bite you. Jeremy?
Really insensitive, because think about it from the perspective of the coach who's working a full-time job during the day, and at night he's coaching these kids, and he's coached them for weeks for this game because it's a rivalry game, and let's just make it up, Cherokee County, and he's really intent on winning this, and he's put a lot of time and effort, and he's not being paid for the job, and he takes it seriously because he's got 30 parents riding his ass throughout the season, don't think he's doing a good enough job. And then he's got some kids on the team who are very serious about it too and been practicing their hearts out doing wall ball every day for 3 weeks for this game. And when they hear that, that's just got to be very deflating to them. And plus the fact that what we said earlier is you're being paid to do this job, right? So I get it. If you're doing a youth game and you're getting ridden hard by a coach or parents, I could see why you might want to say something like this. Calm down, it's only fall ball, or calm down, it's only youth ball. But it's all about empathy. And if you try to put yourself in their shoes, you can see they take this very seriously. It may not be a high school game or an NCAA game, but for them, this is a big deal.
Couldn't have said that any better. And again, this is a professionalism thing, and also consider how your words impact the crew of the next game that this coach is coaching in. These types of comments put that coach in a mindset that all referees are out to get me and I'm never going to get a fair shake. And now that crew has to do more work to bring that coach's perspective around a little bit more. You've made your colleague's life more difficult as a result. You coach, I'll ref. I had said this a few times, or some variation of it. Like, coach, I'm not telling you how to call plays or run your man up. I don't need you telling me how to make calls, right? The response to this, Jeremy, go ahead and just say this statement to me, please.
You coach, I'll ref.
Well, when are you going to start?
There's a trap. I just led you into a response.
Right. And now what is your response going to be? Whistle, conduct, the coach said something mean to me, other team's ball.
And I'm the one who prompted it. I caused it.
Right. This is one, and it's one. Just eliminate this. This is unnecessarily antagonistic, but it's also one, like Jeremy said. You lead this coach into this. You dangled some bait, and not his fault if he decides to really chomp down on that, and then all of a sudden he's looking at a turnover or a flag, technical or personal, depending on your flavor of what's happening in that situation. So this is one where we're gonna at the end of this talk through some responses. But whatever's going on here, again, I'm going to go with silence as my predominating one. It can be a just throw the hand up if he's still going on that one. That's way better than a statement like this, or just say, okay. Whatever all you're doing is acknowledging that you have heard what this coach has said, and then you're jogging to your next position. That is all you need to do. And if he ramps up what's going on, and then we've done that, then And now he keeps going, okay, cool, conduct, turnover. What? You did nothing to lead him into that.
Yeah.
All right. That one will get you. Don't quit your day job. Jeremy, you sent me this one. You want to talk about this?
This just falls in the category of being sarcastic and pissy. It's personal, and you're directing it personally at a coach. So if you've gotten to this point and you're saying this, then something has gone wrong in your officiating, and you need to step back and kind of reassess. It's really not worth it, and you need to kind of evaluate, should you be officiating games if you're going to be going personally after coaches. But I hear things like this, just really nasty stuff, and we got to avoid it. And going back on the point we made earlier about this thing about this is only fall ball or youth ball, how insulting that is, and how insulting this is, when if you think about our philosophy is to grow the game and to honor the sport and how sacred the sport is. So I've been writing about lacrosse a lot recently, and it's a lot of people take it very seriously. It's like something that is more than a sport for them, and we need to take it seriously as well. And we dishonor it by doing things like this. So yeah, avoid it. Don't say quit your day job. If I heard that from a coach saying it to me, it doesn't seem so bad actually, because I've heard worse. But I wouldn't do it the other way. I wouldn't say it to a coach.
This is one of the things where the communication, it's a two-way street, but we don't always get to drive on their side, right?
No.
They get to swerve a little bit on that, and we got to stay the steady, narrow path. Jeremy, you want to just read this out for us?
Sure thing. So when we employ the words that most naturally come to our lips, we run the risk of giving the greatest speech we'll ever live to regret.
Yeah, this is human, right? I think everybody on this call, myself included, can recall probably multiple instances of our brain-mouth connection going awry or not happening at all. And suddenly we've said things we can't take back, and that will forever be in the minds of the people that we care about and care about us. These are the ones where I still, if I think back on it, I cringe to this day, and it's upsetting. And I think that's the part of being such a social species is that's meant to hurt. It should be, because that's stuff that isn't good and doesn't help us collaborate with our fellow people. Go.
That's a really good point, Gordon. Can I interject on something?
Yeah.
Patrick made a good point earlier about taking some time to think about what you're going to do. We don't have the luxury of that in a game where it's happening within 2 hours. You need to make quick decisions. We don't have an overnight time period, but you could even just take a few minutes in a game or the next dead ball before you say something. And sometimes the best action I've gotten, the older I've gotten, the more I understand the value of this is no action, is to do nothing, is to not say anything, because you could just put more gasoline on the fire. So there's sort of a yin and yang of this. When the coach does something, you kind of absorb it without pushing back on it. And that can actually deflate a situation or de-escalate it. But again, if I could just underscore one point, sometimes the best thing is to do no thing.
And again, this is one of those things that extends out from beyond just the field. So talk about your game reports, right? Sometimes we can get so heated, so pissed off about what happened in the game. And if we're the crew chief, we sit down and we just send. And yeah, it might be factual, but there's probably going to be a lot of heat in there as well that's not going to help the administration of that stuff down the road and calls into question your unbiasedness and things like that. Best thing I can do, number one, the helpline is there. We are there to help you proof your game reports if needed. Right? I needed to do this a few years ago. Worst game of my life. We had 28 time-serving personal fouls and 7 ejections. I was miserable. I was so pissed off. I called 2 of my mentors on the way along with my assigner, and they were like, Gordon, don't write anything tonight. Write it tomorrow afternoon. Send us a copy. We'll help you go through that. Then send it to your assigner. And then that was it. It was a 2-page game report. It was a freaking paper. These are those things. This bit of sometimes not doing anything and allowing yourself a cooling off period is the best thing you can do.
Yeah, one other thing on that point, Gordon, too, is some tricks that work for me. If you are writing a game report and this is not a game time situation, and you do have the luxury of a little bit of time, is to go do something else for a while. Chris, go to the gun range, for example. Me, I'll take a walk. And what that does is help sort through things. And you come back to whatever it was by being away from it for a while with a different perspective. And it in a way, you're processing it and you're moving from one part of the brain to another. And you come to this problem you're dealing with a different viewpoint. If you can allow some time to elapse and do something different for a while.
Agreed. Okay. Some crew things in mind. Coach asks you, what was that? What was that? Well, coach, I can't really tell you, but I think you really messed that call up. Yeah, I wouldn't have called that. Yeah, coach, that's not, no. These are things, we are a crew. The crew needs to have one voice, and it needs to be unified. It needs to be coherent, and we are not in the business of throwing one another under the bus. I don't care how bad the call is. It's his call. And more often than not, I don't have the best view of what's going on. I'm likely dealing with something else, especially in a 3-man game where I may have to be looking at some other piece of the field and I only catch this thing out of the corner of my eye. When you're the trail official, the coach wants you to be responsible for the calls that every other official is making because you're the closest referee to him. And so he's going to take advantage of that spectrum, trying to whittle into your head and get in your head in that space. And then suddenly you're refereeing less and spectating more. On top of the fact of being a bit of let's say it, a dick. When that partner rotates over, that coach can be like, hey, you know what? Hey, Gordon said that wasn't a really good call, and Gordon's been doing this for 15 years and you've only been doing this for 2. So what gives? That's not going to be a good post game, I assure you.
Yeah, so there's a lot of gamesmanship going on with coaches. They'll try to go after the field judge, the one they perceive to be the most inexperienced or new. They haven't met him before. It's really incumbent upon the referee to step up, at that point and protect your crew and not throw each other under the bus. We're a team. Because, really, as soon as one goes down, the rest of the crew is going to go down too. It's going to hurt the whole game. So we're a team. We act as a team. We use one voice. And, Gord, what would you do when a coach starts ragging on one of your fellow officials? How do you respond to him? He says, look, that call your partner made was terrible. What tactics do you use, Gordon, to respond to that coach who's going after one of your officials and when you're the referee or the crew chief?
Quite simply, I'm going to say, coach, we're not going to conduct ourselves that way. This is, he's a part of my crew. So what you're saying about him, you're saying about me as well. And I'll make it that I'll make it a bit personal and turn that angst in my direction because that's a little bit about what's being on the crew chief. But also I'm also saying, hey, I can be like, coach, I'm pretty darn far away right here. I don't have the best view in the world. What I will do for you, right? I don't know if it was a good call or not. That might be as far as I go because I didn't see something or I got a bad angle. Coach, I'm going to find out what happened. I'm going to find out and get you an explanation. Or I'm going to go to my partner and have them come and give you an explanation when they have an opportunity. That then puts a pin in it, and that coach can go back to coaching. And then since we made a promise to go get him an explanation, then we have to do that the next opportunity we get. And if it's a younger, less experienced official, I'll probably take that explanation of okay, here's what happened. And if it's somebody who's getting more confident, standing in the stripes and maybe being a crew chief more often, I'll be like, okay, cool. Why don't you rotate over there? Or we got 2 minutes left, so at the break, go talk to coach, tell him what's what.
Yeah.
Cool. That's my style.
Yeah, and then when they're doing that yelling across the field at your partner who's on the far side, and if you're bench side, one of the tactics you can use is, coach, I'm right here. You can talk to me. I'm right here. And let them vent, and then do precisely what Gordon says. Like, I'll find out. I'll get back to you, or my partner will. But you can kind of stop that right away by saying, coach, I'm right here. Talk to me.
Love that. Jeremy, calm down.
I am calm.
No, calm down.
I am calm. God damn it.
Flag down. You cursed at me. Right? Again, another leading, baiting thing. Anybody have a partner on this call? Have you ever had this work in an argument? No. It does the exact opposite of what you want to do. You can say this in your head all you want. The only thing that's going to calm down another individual is if you yourself are calm. There is a unique part of the human brain. They call them mirror neurons. It's more apt for children, but they stay with us for our entire life. Is we are more likely in a conversation, no matter the argument or heated contents of that argument, to mimic in some degree the person we're arguing with. So if Jeremy and I are nice and calm and right over here and just, all right, coach, okay, I understand. All right, okay, can I, oh, all right, you're still going? All right, okay. All right, coach, let me see if I understood you correctly. And then that type of behavior gets picked up on subconsciously by every other human being on the planet. And you can use that to your advantage on that one. You cannot escalate with calm down, because that, as you just saw, goes up and up, and then suddenly there's a flag, and suddenly you're a bad official because you're just a mean guy who wants to throw flags, right?
Well, it's also judgmental. I mean, because you're really saying the coach is not calm and collected, right? And what happens when you said that to a coach who maybe was raising his voice a little bit, and you've used that calm down, and then the coach from the other bench is actually worse.
There you go.
And you've played that card. But it can be insulting to a coach who really was just asking a question, or raising his voice because he didn't think you could hear him. And Gordon's tactic's really good, like we talked about earlier. When you can lower the volume of your voice, it really actually shows a stark contrast with the coach who is yelling. Or it may bring the coach down to your volume of your voice too, to match you. And have a really calming, soothing voice when you're doing it. Maybe use some Jedi mind tricks when you're talking to him as well.
Very helpful. All right. Next word out of your mouth. This, in a sense, and this is maybe can go into the old school way of officiating, and can work for some officials. This does not work for me, because it just doesn't fit with my personality and also how I know coaches perceive me. There are some kind of rough and tumble officials out there who are like, oh, that's their coach, I've had enough, right? But this is also one where you're leading the coach a little bit, but it's also one where there's a better way to set a threshold and communicate that you've reached your limit. Jeremy, you want to dive into that a little?
Well, it's just wrong. I mean, it's leading into a trap, into an argument and a flag and all sorts of trouble. But it's also wrong because we want to be able to communicate with the coach. So what if his next words were, Mr. Official, I have a question. I just want to know, about your understanding of this rule. And he had a really polite, informative, he's really trying to understand something. So what happens when he says something, but it's polite? What do you do? We don't want to shut down communication. We need to be talking to the coach for the rest of the game.
Yeah.
So I just wouldn't do it. Next word out of your mouth, then what? And I don't know, Gordon, if we're going to address this later in the presentation, but you're making a threat. Or are you going to carry through with it?
That's one we'll talk about that with better ways to set the line. A much better alternative to this particular phrase is, Coach, I've had enough, or Coach, that's enough.
Yeah.
That carries the message. That with a hand in the air, that says it, right? Coach, I've had enough. The next comment like that is going to cost you. In some ways, that's going to be a turnover, or that's going to be a flag. Tell them specifically what's what, and then it won't be a surprise when you have to jump to that if they decide to do that. But Jeremy's right. It could be the nicest freaking statement in the world next, and then he's looking at you like, well, what are you going to do?
Right.
You said it was the next word out of my mouth, and I said all the nicest, prettiest words, right? There you
Yeah.
go. Ooh, Jeremy, you sent me this one, and I was like, yeah, this is going in here. I think this is the second or very last kind of statement that we're saying what not to say. You want to kind of see why this is not a good
There's all
idea?
sorts of variations on this too, but it's when you know you've made a bad call, right? And I've never said this to my credit, but you've made a bad call and you know it, and the coach is on riding you. Really, what you're doing is a trap because you're like, you're gonna ignore something next, or you're gonna not follow a certain rule, and you're gonna disadvantage the other team by doing it. So you wouldn't say something like this. The better way to respond to that is, Coach, I made a mistake. I got that wrong. We're gonna do better. I promise you. I care about this game. So that's what I was getting at with this statement. Is this isn't about like, uh, I'm sorry I made that mistake, and I'm going to make it up for you by making another mistake that's going to piss off the other team. It's, Coach, I'm owning up to it. I made that mistake. We're going to fix it, and we're going to do our best not to repeat it.
There you go. Nailed that. Okay. So, Jeremy, why don't you just state this one, and then we're gonna. This is the shift. This is the very end of the presentation. Now we're gonna talk about some things to do, some things that are good to say, and then some models that we can use, and then we'll wrap up.
So here then is the powerful sentence that will allow you to interrupt anyone without fear of bodily harm. Quote, "Let me be sure I heard what you just said."
This is PFM. Pure effing magic. This statement does wonders, has done wonders for me ever since I came across it. And and I've used variations of it, and you've heard me say that already. It's just like, once the coach has to take a breath in because he's vented for 30 straight seconds in your face, you just turn to the side and go, okay, let me see if I understand you correctly. That is such a huge bridge that you are building between yourself and that coach from an empathetic level, excuse me. And it also shows the coach is like, he's willing to listen to me. I may be a pain right now, and I've had those moments with coaches. They're like, hey, I'm sorry, I flew off the handle. I'm like, Coach, no worries. It's a competitive game. That's what's going to happen. That's your role. This is my role, right? But let me be sure I understood what you just said, or some variation of that. Number one, takes the heat of the conversation down considerably. And number two, it primes the coach to be more receptive to whatever it is you're going to say, because he's saying, like, I've at least said my piece. It's only fair that you get to say yours. And at the end of it may be, Coach, we may disagree on this bit. This is just how I saw it, and here's how we're going to move forward. This takes the heat out of it. Jeremy, anything jump up to you?
Yeah, two things strike me about this, Gordon, is in the verbal judo world, this does two things. It makes them repeat something or think about repeating something they may not want to say a second time, right? And it gets them thinking about decorum, right? But the second thing it does is it buys you time. So if they've just said something really crazy, and you're pretty sure you know what they said, but you need to formulate how you're going to respond, you can buy yourself time by saying, let me be sure I heard what you just said. Could you repeat that? And it shows, like Gordon said, that you're being empathetic, you're listening. You've got my attention. And while you're thinking about your next move, I'm thinking about my next move.
There you go. So we're going to transition here into some things that we would recommend that you say. And you're going to realize that these are remarkably simple, nearly one word all the time. And then we'll check out some models of conversation. But here we go. Okay. This is another PFM word. It does wonders. Okay, this is one of my mentors, Jim Carbonell. He says this all the times in games in his thick Boston accent, but this is just coaches yelling it. That was a slash. Come on. That was a slash, wasn't it? That was a slash. Okay, coach, I hear you. Okay. I need to talk to you soon. Okay. That was a terrible call over there. Okay. All it does is say it's a verbal acknowledgement. It's a head nod that's like, yep, I got you. I heard you, and that's it. Statements are okay. Statements are fine. You know, questions get answered, but statements don't need anything more than a one-word reply or just like a quick little acknowledgement to the sideline on it. That's all they want. Similarly, understood. Jeremy, you sent me this one. This one speaks to you a good bit.
Yeah, so I heard this one from Skip Cooper at the U.S. Lacrosse Convention. It's a really good one because the coach is yelling, that was a slash, that was a push, whatever, and you are not agreeing or disagreeing with the coach. All you're doing is indicating that you heard him by saying understood. And what that could do is it de-escalates the situation. As the coach said, he heard me, he's listening. I got my point across, he thinks. But you're not agreeing with him or disagreeing. All you're saying is understood.
Yeah. This is one where no, you can't hurt yourself in any way, shape, or form with these two words. Okay, understood. I hear you. Those I repeat all the time in all my games, at every level of play, and it does wonders for statements, and it does wonders as well for a time saver of you being able to think that coach has a problem with this and he keeps on repeating it. I may have to swing by the sideline or chat at the quarter break or halftime with my partners about something. We may have to go over and explain something or get a little bit more insight. Like, why is this thing keep, irking this coach so darn much? And you say, okay, understood. After about the third time, I'm like, I don't really want to have to keep dealing with this thing anymore. Let's go find out what the problem is and see if my partners and I can work out what the solution is on that one. That's also an opportunity for growth as an official and kind of recognizing the whole game picture. Okay, this was going to be a line in the sand graphic, as you can tell by the words line in the sand graphic. Okay. Clearly I wasn't fully awake from my nap typing this thing up. But setting your line in the sand, setting your threshold. I went for years trying to understand this and figure this out, and a lot of officials just like, you gotta set your threshold, man. Gotta set your threshold. Gotta be confident out there. Gotta set your threshold. And pissed me off because I didn't know what the hell that was, right? For me, I found a way to do it. It involves pen and paper. It involves some thought, and it involves answering one question. What statements can a coach make, can a player make, that distract me from officiating? That's the question that needs answering. Because as soon as I'm distracted from officiating and my brain goes over to this squirrel problem of what the heck did he just say to me? I'm no longer paying attention. Something could happen. And now I don't have eyes on, or I do have eyes on, but my brain isn't connected to my eyes and I can't referee as well. Right? So now I'm not refereeing and I'm not doing a safe, fair job and we're not facilitating the game, all because I'm distracted by this statement. Take some time before the games get started this season, tonight even, to write down some phrases that bug the living hell out of you, right? Some stuff that if you hear, you're going to have to deal with them in some way. This is setting the threshold. So this is something where if I hear something, okay, the folks who know me will laugh at me, but if a coach calls me Lou, which is my dad's name, and who I am much better looking than, I get pissed off. That does not, I don't like that. Like, they can call me Corsetti, that's fine, I'm good with that, but don't call me Lou. Name's Gordon, right? We know this, you have a card with a name on it. I don't like that, it bugs me. It's not for me a foul, I'm not gonna, but that's also one where I'm gonna be like, now my radar is up for, is that coach going to escalate to some other statement, to some other thing? And the question is if in a game you realize you've been distracted, now you take corrective action. Now you work the ramp. That is, you have to figure out the types of things that bug you, that will distract you. And then you got to, so as soon as you recognize that, your next step is there's a warning, or there's a conduct foul, or there's a unsportsmanlike conduct foul, or there's a second and an ejection. That is, for me, has been the deciding factor as to whether or not I'm going to start working the ramp. But you have to do that ahead of time. You've got to think about the things that are going to bug you, and that doesn't mean you're primed to listen for those stuff, but you've identified what things will stop you from officiating for a period of time. And that's dangerous, right? Because that's what our job is to officiate. So as soon as the coach has taken us out of that space, he has now negatively influenced the safety and fairness of that game. And then we now have to do something to correct that behavior. Jeremy?
Those are really good points, Gordon. I mean, especially this part about being taken out of your game and how dangerous that can be, where you would miss a safety call, where a player is getting blown up after taking a shot. So to think about in advance your triggers, things that you will not tolerate, such as a coach questioning your integrity or the integrity of your partners, or anyone using racist language. Those are things we will nip in the bud immediately. And for me, those are personally things that are just no-go areas, right? Where we need to stop and handle those right away because they could have consequences for the rest of the game, including taking you out of your game. So really good point, Gordon. Thank you.
Okay, so this is the last bit of this, right? And then we'll certainly have some time for more Q&A if anybody wants to dive into that. So this is a model of conversation. You will see this in Verbal Judo if you ever attend one of their seminars. It's also explained in the book Verbal Judo, which I do highly recommend. It's an excellent read and has helped me in my arguments on and off the field. But this is a model of conversation. This is, whether you want to believe in this or not, this is what's happening every time you have a conversation with a coach. Every single time. Okay? We've got the GLOA, the organization, the association on the left-hand side. We have the coach on the right-hand side. And the coach is dealing with a lot of FUD, fear, uncertainty, and doubt, right? That happens in any game, in any situation, especially if he doesn't know you as the official, right? And you're kind of coming in completely green to him. But also it's just like, this could be their first trip to the playoffs, and how are they going to play, and what's going to happen in that bit. There's always fear, uncertainty, and doubt that we now have to address. That's going to be the undercurrent of what's happening with the coach. You are that delightful little green star in the middle. And in this space, you are the star of the show. This is the one real area of officiating where I think we get to shine by making it look like we don't really do anything particularly special, right? We're invisible in that space, but you'll see where this model takes us and what we do. So this is what happens. Every single time you have a conversation with a coach, this is what happens. So the line goes from left to right. Always goes from left to right. So it starts with you in the center, goes to the left, goes around the association, goes back through you, goes around the coach, comes back to you. This is the model. Every single time you represent the GLOA, every time you open your mouth. The organization, the shield, every official, the assigners, all the time. All officials across the country, even globally. Anybody who's ever worn stripes, ever, right? Heady feeling. But this is true. Every time you open your mouth, you are representing the GLOA. That's fact number one. Now we keep on doing this. We keep on doing this model. We keep rolling. And some conversations are different. Some are longer, some are shorter, some are whatever. But you'll start to notice here that every conversation, if we're doing this correctly, if we're representing our association, if we're being professional, if we're staying calm, we start rounding that rough edge off of that coach. We start eliminating his fear, his uncertainty, and his doubt, or we start bringing those down a good bit. And what happens is, if you keep on looking here, is now where we went back, we've got a nice circle, and it's a unified, loving group of embraced of officials who enjoy and love the sport. And then you got the coach over there who just wants to win, and he's structured in that little space. But now, through our actions, through our way of conversing and interacting, we're making that circle a little bit more, or that square a little bit more like that circle. We're showing that coach, that antagonist in that space, a little bit of our perspective. And that builds over time. That builds over every game. And you start establishing a really positive relationship with coaches over the years. I certainly have, and I'm better for it. But this is what's happening is we're not speaking over coaches or just to them. If you approach this from honestly, I'm probably not going to bring you 100% over to the referee's side. That's not feasible. It's not realistic, but it is realistic to think I can give you a little bit of our perspective, and that's going to help them understand our job a little bit better. And that's going to help a safe, fair game. And it's going to help us facilitate that game that much more effectively. Jeremy, what does this say to you?
Well, it just goes back to what we were saying earlier, is that you're not representing just yourself on the field, but the entire association. And the consequences of your actions on the field are going to carry over to the next crew on that same field afterwards. So it's about stepping out of your shoes and looking at other people and having empathy for the coaches, but also your fellow officials, because your reputation, your actions on the field, the next crew is going to have to deal with that. And if you get into these traps that we're talking about and say those things that we're hoping you avoid, that coach is going to be loaded for bear when the next crew comes. And will outthink them and be prepared to respond to those witty comments that you used in the game before.
Hi, how are you this afternoon, ma'am? My name's Andrew, if I can help you find it.
Hold on. Oh boy. There we go. You back, Jeremy?
I'm back. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I got you.
Right. No, well said, Gordon. Very well, good model there. And why don't we move into Q&A if there's anybody have questions?
Here's the last little piece of this, because you said it without saying it for this particular model. You'll notice you're the star of the show. What happens to the star over the course of this entire thing? You start disappearing. All of a sudden, all that's left is the GLOA and other officials. Just by your actions, you start changing the perception of how that coach views every other official he'll ever interact with. That's the goal of this, is that we disappear, and all that's left is like, no, that's just how officials act. They're calm, they're considerate, they're stern if need be, but they're emphatic. They'll listen to you. So Jeremy,
well, the reverse of that too, Gordon, we should say, is like, if you are a model of behavior on the field and can have a really good game and a good rapport with the coaches, despite it being very contested, an intense game, and they admire your integrity and your hustle and the way you communicate, then that buys, karma essentially for the next crew that comes on.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a reverse effect to that. I've got another GLOA crew coming. Thank God. I don't have to be full of fear and trepidation, and I will address them with respect, the respect they deserve. So it goes both ways.
Hey,
so,
Gordon.
Hold tight. I'm gonna have you ask what you're having here, and then we'll open it up for everybody else. But while we're doing that, a little homework assignment for right now. Take out your phones. Please put in Jeremy's number and my number, and send us a text with your name in it. Whether I want to know if I have your number or not. So please do that right now as we're answering our Q&A stuff, and then we'll be able to put your numbers as we go. So just hit those up.
Hey, Gordon.
Who's Joyce? Go ahead.
Hey, one quick question.
Yeah.
You guys did a real good job with this. So here's a question for you. You think that coaches either want, the two main things that people need to take away is coaches want to be heard or communicated with. Is that basically the gist? Oversimplifying everything we just talked about?
I mean, that's it. And I think that's fair for, really any argument you get into with anybody is what's the problem with that? Is a breakdown in communication somewhere will lead to more of an argument. And unless somebody's able to kind of step out of that space, there's no way to de-escalate. So yeah, it's they want to be heard, acknowledged, maybe might be the way I'd say it. They want to be able to be communicated with. Yeah, absolutely.
And I'm just saying in general. I'm not saying for a good situation or bad. I'm just saying in general.
That's what they want.
I think that's what coaches, and I'll just say this from a science perspective, it usually comes down to, when I see tape, more times than 2/3 of the time at minimum, officials do the right thing. Where we get in trouble is communication.
Mm-hmm.
The flip side of what Patrick and we've been talking about during this whole thing is, nothing will irritate a coach more is when you don't respond to them and you ignore them. It could be really aggravating. I mean, I've coached before. Gordon has coached. If the official is ignoring you, like, what do you do with that? So those things like, understood or okay, at least acknowledges them. I acknowledge your presence. So communication is key. They want to be heard.
Okay. That is the presentation. Let's remember this. Hold it. So
he said, are you taking?
We'll open this up for a big Q&A, whether you want to type things in or if you want to voice your question here, you can. This whole thing has been recorded. It'll be up on the GLOA YouTube page in a couple of days. Height will send out an email on that, and then he'll send out again in another newsletter soon the upcoming talks. Again, you only have to attend one of these breakout sessions, though we do highly recommend that you attend as many as you are able to. And if you can't, again, they're going to be recorded. So we've got that. So if anybody has any questions, anything like that, let's take a couple of minutes and the floor is y'all's.
Or you can text or say the things that you've said that you regret saying. Give us your top three phrases we should avoid, or the top three that we should say.
Hey, Gordon, I had a question regarding the basically the infinity on that graphic.
Yeah.
Could there also be like that perspective, it was the positive aspect of things, but if there was negative connotation, negative officials, could that infinity go greater than and take away from rounding out at the edges?
Yeah, no, I'm doing that. No.
I think that's
Hey, Joe, I'm muting you because you get a lot of weird background noise. Again, let me see if I get this straight on this one. Can that go in the opposite direction and not have the intended effect by doing more antagonistic things? Yeah.
Yes.
Absolutely. The fortunate thing is the GLOA has a really strong reputation, and so especially if officials are new stepping into this space, that's a good thing. That is a foundation they can step on and use, and now their job is to not crumble that foundation from what they're doing. But yes, this is one where the board takes these things seriously. When we hear from coaches or if we hear from officials that an official has done something or said something that is wildly inappropriate or just genuinely unprofessional, and corrective action will be taken, and it has in the past. Because we've got a responsibility not just to the coaches on the game, but to all of our officials and all the guys who we're going to be assigning in the future. So absolutely, that can go the other way where you're not really addressing that coach's problems, and you can actively be making the situation worse because you decided you wanted to let your ego run the show as opposed to your more logical faculties. What else we got, folks? Okay, goalie says he was in the crease. Okay. Ooh, Mike. Okay, so Mike's put this one. So goalie tells the official attackman A1 was in the crease. Official says to goalie, if you were focused on the ball, you wouldn't know he was in the crease. That's freaking hilarious. Yeah, maybe true. It may be true. And consider this, especially when you're a crew chief, but you can do this at any level of play. Consider the goal of building and maintaining allies. The head coach is not the only person we can speak with. I've had really good interactions with goalies because usually you're around them a good bit, and they're asking you questions on some stuff. But I've shot the breeze with an attackman, at the top of the box while we're waiting for a face-off. And that's building an association where it's like, hey, I could probably go over to this official if I need something. That's a good thing to do. Same thing with an assistant coach. Sometimes the head coach is not in the best headspace to ask a question or to deal with something. I'm going to be like, he's really angry. I'm not going to go within 15 feet of him. Let me go over to the assistant coach who I've known for the last 3 or 4 years and have a pretty good relationship with and be like, hey, by the way, this needs to be addressed. Cool. Right? I freaking love that fight. There's no need to be adversarial, but really anything that you think is funny, assume the other person is not going to think it's funny. It's just not, this is not the space where jokes are going to do you the best good.
Yeah, there's no harm either in complimenting players on the field who show good sportsmanship. look, hey, I really appreciated the sportsmanship you showed there after that goal where someone got blown up and you helped pick him up.
Mhm.
That's building relationships and honoring the game. So there's no harm in that. Totally endorse that.
A couple of years ago, I started doing. I would find a thing to praise a player for, usually on either team. But if a defenseman dug out a really good ground ball in a tough scrum and gets it upfield, and I've got some time because I'm a slow trail in the 3-man crew, I'll probably slide over to him and be like, "Hey, that was a great ground ball." And more often than not, they're like, "Oh, thanks, ref, appreciate it." And then I'm just jogging on by. And that's just another bit where all I'm doing is getting another ally, where in a tight situation, he's probably going to be the guy that calms down the player who's pissed off and wants to charge at me and be like, whoa, 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 this ref's cool. He thought I had a good ground ball, right? These are good things to add to your referee toolbox that will benefit you in the future.
Look how thin we look in that photo, Gordon. It seemed like ages ago.
Yeah, that was the end of 2019, right?
Yeah,
that was 2018.
UGA versus South Carolina, and I don't know. I look like I'm 10 years older than that.
Yeah, that was I think that was my first game back from Baltimore. That was fun.
And for the photo, Gordon cropped out Peter Fleury, by the way.
We don't need more pictures of him. All right.
Smart move.
So thank you for everyone who sent us text. I will get those numbers and replies over to that. And if there's any conversations or questions you want to take offline with Jeremy or myself, you'll be more than welcome to do that. I know Jeremy and I certainly love to have these conversations because they get us a little better as well, but also gives us a good sense of kind of where guys are at in the association with certain things, which helps us influence training for next year. Again, be on the lookout for another newsletter from GLOA and the post up on Facebook as well. Be on the lookout for the recording of this session, and we will see you guys hopefully a little bit next Thursday when we do this again.
Thank you all. Good night. Good to see you all. I hope to be on the field with you again soon.
Night, everybody.
Good night.
Thank you.
Good night. Thank you.
Do, 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 do.